In the New Hampshire State Archives, 2 copper plates tell the story of a struggle for dominance between 2 European superpowers. Seldom discussed, King George's War involved much of New England. The war primarily took place in the British provinces of New York, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Nova Scotia. The war was part of a much longer conflict between France and Britain. Throughout the Middle Ages and into the early modern period, France and Britain were frequently at odds. Both nations claimed control over France, and France often allied against Britain. These conflicts, when fought on the Western Front, often involved both colonists loyal to the British Crown and Native Americans who fought on both sides. The engraved copper plates were used to print banknotes for the province of New Hampshire around 1744. The plates were used to print 40, 20, and 7.5 shilling notes, intended primarily to finance a military expedition to Canada during the war. Provincial records show that Governor Benning Wentworth, his council, and the General Assembly approved a new emission of bills totaling £13,000, nearly $2 million today, to finance 350 able-bodied and effective volunteers from New Hampshire for a raid on Fort Louisburg at Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, to promote the welfare of all governments of New England. After a 46-day siege, New England troops took the fort on June 15, 1745. This was considered New England's greatest military victory until the American Revolution. They paid a heavy price for this short-lived triumph, however, losing roughly 1,000 men to exposure. Several more skirmishes throughout the war occurred in New Hampshire territory, including a small settlement in what is now present-day Charlestown, known as Number 4. At the onset of the war, a fort was quickly erected by settlers to provide for their own protection. The fort was attacked numerous times by French and native forces, and every time they were repelled by the militia. Fort Louisburg was reluctantly returned to the French by New England and British forces following a treaty in 1748, which effectively ended the war. The terms of the treaty called for each side to give back what it had won during the conflict. Less than 20 years later, colonists would be taxed to pay for another conflict with France, leading them to question whether footing the bill for British dominance was worth it.